So, the first problem I encountered when starting this project was finding something to write about. So, originally, I thought maybe I could just write a normal hero's journey, like one where there'd be a big, let's say, a big guy that enters a war zone or something like that. But then I figured out everyone goes through their own hero's journey every single day of their lives. And most of the times, it involves going through trivial things such as even picking out your own what to wear in the morning. But then I realized the bigger picture was how we grow up. And that impacts us severely and basically determines what we do in our future and how we're going to spend the rest of our lives. So that was essentially how I came up with my honors project. And so a situation which I had to adapt to when starting my honors project was originally I had two honor projects to do. One was two projects to do. One was the honors project and one was a general one. That created a problem because I had to figure out two things to write about, and it doubled the workload. But eventually we figured out through talking with Mr. Bay's wife that it would be easier to do just one and spend more time on that so it can be up to quality for an actual honors project. And my skills as a communicator improved over the process of this because I was able to convey ideas and thoughts to the people who I was talking to about this project. And I have benefited from this project specifically because I was able to go back in time to my childhood and look at things that I previously hadn't looked at before. And that included having to go re-experience what it was like to enter kindergarten and go through a strange experience, because everyone's strange experience starts there. They don't realize what they're going into and how they're going to stick with that plan for the rest of their lives, almost. And the most difficult process of this writing was being able to summarize experiences into words, because some experiences you cannot put into words very easily, such as someone dying in your life. There's no words you can actually put for that. What you feel is just an emotion, but not so much you can put it into words. And so right now I'll be reading us the beginning part, the introduction of my story to you. Somehow, growing up was always lonely, regardless of how much my parents tried to support and care for me. There had always been a missing piece in my life. Sorrow and pain filled the emptiness inside, but I never knew what it was that was missing. There was no label and no reason. It just subconsciously existed. As a toddler, everyone assumed that I had no logical reasoning and was not autonomous. And that was true, for my arms and legs were not fully developed as theirs was. And of course, I had no form of speaking, and the doctors diagnosed this as me being mute, whatever that meant. I simply did not see any reason to talk to people. They communicated their thoughts to me all the time, even if I did not wish to hear. As I entered kindergarten with the other children, whom I grew to despise, it seemed as though they were full of energy and a strange curiosity, but lacked the logical reasoning to make any real inquiries. They loved to skitter around the playground and pick up bugs, and even attempting to devour them. I mean, that seems to make sense since the amount of protein in these bugs surpassed most other foods, as well as the amount of bugs that thrive in this world. It seemed like a plausible food source. The emptiness always existed, but never varied. It never worsened, and it never progressed to a better state. It was a constant that persisted with daily life. I lived in a dark, grotesque neighborhood filled with houses that were on the verge of collapse. My family was nothing special. We had enough money to feed ourselves and provide for daily necessities, but never enough to buy more. I hated toys, and my room was a constant mess that never organized itself, despite the constant nagging from my mother to tidy it. Spending the majority of my free time on a beach at the end of the cul-de-sac bench, I thought and wondered about the people and environment in which surrounded me, and occasionally about the strange hole that consumed me. It was now fourth grade, and time passed as it should. I noticed that as I got older, time speed seemed to speed up. I perceived this as a regularity or a constant change. One explanation I had for this was because most children grow taller as they get older, and when you looked at things, there's always a slight delay as to what's happening in the moment and how you perceive this. The taller you are, the more time it took for the light waves to bounce off an object to reach your retinas. I mean, it seemed logical, but it could also be that as you become used to a constant that affects you, the meaning begins to diminish over time. For example, if you're provided water and food your whole life, the importance of water and food would diminish over time because it's a constant in your life. Obviously, if you lacked any of these two things, then you would regulate your priorities for your own survival. A constant, a regularity, a change. It seemed as I reached the first day of school, another child caught my attention. She was quiet, which is a drastic change from other kids filled with nervousness and excitement. She had sharp blue eyes and a color that resembled navy, but glistened as light reflected on the solubility of the liquid. So essentially, this was my first encounter with someone who eventually changed my life, because I grew up without much social contact, and that was one of my first friends. And basically, as time would pass, I grew closer and closer to her. But after an event, she had died and passed away in a car crash. So that's essentially what started my journey into the abyss of the hero's journey, and that would impact me for the rest of my life. So essentially that caused a sort of severe depression that I would call for about a year or two, but it was just sort of a feeling that I knew I had to get through it, otherwise nothing else would get better in my life. So I guess that's what I think of the hero's journey, is that once you know that there's a process that it goes through, that you go down into an abyss, that you can push forward and get out of it. And that's basically how I perceived it. And that's basically my presentation.
Can I ask you some questions?
Yes.
First of all, I'm so impressed by what you do. In the classroom, you write such brilliant essays. They're twice the length, I was telling Dr. Friedman, of all the other students, and they're twice as penetrating and insightful. So I always thought that you were a very logical person. But then when you gave your presentation, you said, well, I'm going to try something unique. I'm going to look at the hero's journey not in a book or as a schema or as a historical process, a cultural process, but I'm going to look at it from my own individual, personal experience and create a first-person narrative that shows the process of the hero's journey in growing up. I thought to myself, well, this is very interesting because Jonathan's not as logical as, he's not just a logical, smart student. He's actually trying something where he's digging deeper, and as you said, you had to find words to describe experiences and to convey ideas that maybe words can't even match. And so I thought it was a very interesting challenge that you set yourself as such a logical, intelligent, kind of conscious person to delve down into the unconscious and into your childhood and into difficult experiences that words can't describe. It seems like you set yourself a task that you didn't really have to. You could have done a PowerPoint, you could have given me an encyclopedia of heroes' journeys, as you have in class, in all of your essays. You could have given us a very detailed account. But instead you chose something which was so personal and so involved a real hero's journey, going as Orpheus did into the underworld, as Odysseus did into the realm of shadows. And, often it's in search of a loved one or it has to do with loss. And so I think my question is sort of why you chose such a difficult task. But I can see that maybe in choosing to write this personal account, delving into your past, dredging up ideas from the past, often painful ones, including the loss of a loved one, that you were actually inscribing a hero's journey. And can you just tell us a little bit more about the writer's craft? Because you moved away from being a scholar into being narrating really depths of human experience, and it's a personal, it's a kind of heroic thing that you did, actually. But tell us a little bit more about the process of moving away from writing just a scholarly paper, which you do so well, to trying something so different and so really painful in many ways.
Well, I think of writing as sort of a way to convey ideas and to share information from things that you learned or that came from the past. And one of the things that I have learned in my life was that you have to consider everyone else's experience. Like, I'm pretty sure all of you had gone through something that was painful, that caused you to feel extremely bad. But I learned that if you're going to talk to someone about something, you have to consider that they have gone through something just as bad or something that's even worse. And I guess writing about this was, I tried to make it seem like it was sort of a more dramatic. And so doing that, I wanted people to know that you're not the only one going through suffering also. Everyone else does that too.
Interesting. You want to ask?
No.
So it's a therapeutic. It was therapeutic for you, but you're saying, basically, you're saying all of us have a common experience, that life, that we're all on a hero's journey in a way, and that, but this pain, this suffering that you describe, actually brings us together instead of separating us.
Yes.
Yes. Now, did you articulate all the stages of the hero's journey because you go back to childhood, like even your description of being in a child's body, was fantastic, and the difficulty, inability of communicating. You kind of mentally took us through all the stages of growth. Now, when you go into the abyss and you lose your friend, did you articulate the steps back to the society? Because right now, when you come back and share this with us, you're a hero returning home. You have a reward, which you're sharing with us, a benefit, which is, I've been through it, I'm stronger for it, we're all in this together. You've communicated a lot of the, but I'm just wondering, the second half of the hero's journey, did you articulate the steps in your narrative about, and if you did, what aspects of those came to mind?
I did this thing within my writing that I ended the story earlier than it should have been. Like, I ended it around at the climax of the story, for the specific reason that you should feel it in yourself. It's not the sort of me being lazy part. It's more like, if you understood what I had gone through then you could understand that the story being written now is something that basically shows the return.
So yeah, the return. No, I know. Your story does end with leaving the main character and the reader with the question of, okay, this is what you really have to deal with in life. We're not pulling any punches. This is the real, some of the difficulties that life has in store for us. But you say you did add a little bit more in the return. I'm curious what more you'd added.
Well, this was
that was your first version,
yeah,
right?
that was the first version of it, and that wasn't complete, so I added more to it, and that was just the steps of the actual of this part where it gets worse and worse and worse, but then you realize you have to get better, and that's when I ended it. And at a paragraph or so after that, I talked about what I'm saying now, which is, you have to understand that there's another end to the story. It's not exactly the end when you think it is.
Right.
That it continues, so you cannot actually just end it there.
Do you intend to, because I'm just curious, do you intend to write more material like this, which is kind of imaginative literature, or are you more interested in scholarly writing? Because your scholarly essays are so interesting on a kind of logical plane. It's almost scientific the way you approach stuff. You kind of put it all together, and it's fascinating just on the intellectual level. But this is deeper. This is more emotionally troubling, more traumatic experience. But do you intend to do more of this this kind of writing in the future?
I guess it would depend what I'm writing about. Because for the hero's journey, I perceived it as more of an emotional thing rather than a scholarly thing. Whereas when within ancient Greek texts, there's a lot of emotions behind it, but you also have to learn the basic concepts of possibility and things like that.
Yeah, all the conceptual apparatus that goes with that. You're good?
I have no questions. I'm just fascinated by the conversation.
Yeah.
This is totally out of my field, so all sorts of books I haven't read. And
Well, Jonathan
writing
is
and-
always surpassing expectation. He's always surprising me. Okay, well, Jonathan, thank you very much. I'll appreciate. You actually went, just for the record, you went in a direction that no other student did. You went and kind of probed on your own hero's journey, imaginatively. You kind of went into very difficult stuff that lies very deep, that people often repress because it's too difficult to, even the experience of childhood. Adults, even teenagers repress that. They don't want to think. They have too much on their ahead of them in the present moment, trying to cope with the present moment. To do what you did, which was to journey imaginatively back and reconstruct the whole difficult process of growing up, of being unsure of yourself. And I loved even that scientific description where you were saying, as I grew up, and you were talking about the regularity. Wasn't that fascinating?
Mhm.
How as certain things become more routine, they diminish in importance, and so the daily routine becomes more familiar. So things that were originally strange to you as a child become familiar. They subside in importance and priority. Other things come to the surface. I mean, it was really a treat. And I don't know quite how you did it. And I wish you well in continuing, both as a scholar and as a creative writer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.